Hello, and welcome back to Cayenne Pepper Commentary. With plenty of upsets, this is another thrilling week of football, so let's jump straight into our game recaps. Speaking of upsets, we kick off on Thursday Night Football with one of the biggest upsets of the week, an absolutely phenomenal day from rookies Cam Scadaboo and Jackson Dart, combining for 5 touchdowns on the day, 3 from the bowling ball and 2 from Dart. Philadelphia kept it close through the first half, only down 17-20 when the third quarter kicked off, but with the Giants tacking on 2 touchdowns, the New York defense holding Philly scoreless, and this game was just out of reach. Will I be concerned for the entirety of the Giants' offense mental health in about 5 years? Sure. Is this team fun to watch and would be awesome if they made a crazy wildcard push? Definitely. This game was definitely much closer than it should have been, but the better team still managed to win the game. A very poor performance from both teams offensively, which at least makes a little sense for the Jets given how good this Denver defense is, leads to a pretty boring game. Broncos lost the only turnover of the game from a Troy Franklin fumble. On top of them only having 246 yards of offense. Should have been enough for New York to get their first win, but poor play calling and clock management on the Jets' final drive ultimately spells their demise. I was a hardcore defender of Justin Fields during his time on the Bears, so watching him only throw for 45 yards today really hurt my soul. I hope this team doesn't go winless. I really thought the Browns were going to put up a much better fight than they did. They had virtually no offense all game, with poor Dylan Gabriel throwing 52 passes when Cleveland realized they could not get the ground game going. The Browns' defense did the best it could through the first half, holding Pittsburgh to a measly 9 points. But when your own offense only puts up 3 in the first half, you eventually just get worn out. Aaron Rodgers throws in a touchdown on back-to-back drives coming out of the break to secure a Steelers victory. As much as I like Stefanski, the guy's an absolute defensive mastermind. This is a league run by offense, and if your quarterback has to throw it 52 times, it just gets hard to win games in this league. The Dolphins basically had the complete opposite problem of what happened last week. Tua could absolutely not get the ball moving, throwing for 3 interceptions, including the final play of the game, but their run game was absolutely electric. Devon Achane ran for 128 yards and also carried in 2 touchdowns as he almost single-handedly fought to make this game winnable for Miami. Unfortunately for them, though, the Chargers had an absolutely phenomenal day offensively. Justin Herbert was able to connect with his receivers for 2 passing touchdowns, and Kamani Vidal had 124 yards on the ground. They did struggle getting it into the end zone, however, with Cameron Dicker coming out for 5 field goals, but he drilled every single one. Good win for the Chargers as they fight with the Broncos for dominance of the AFC West. I apologize for everything I've ever said about Drake May, even the positive stuff. He had an absolute field day on this defense, and statistically is a top 5 quarterback in the NFL right now. I may even go as far as to argue he's contending in the MVP race. The Patriots defense still looked iffy though, giving up 19 points to a very mediocre Saints team, but they also only allowed 1 touchdown on the day, with the other 12 points coming from field goals. Drake May cashes in all of New England's touchdowns as well as leading his team in rushing yards. Because of their win against Buffalo last week, this actually propels the Patriots to first in the AFC East. They haven't won the division in 5 years, but maybe this is the year they get it back. Unfortunately, this game was just not what it's been in past years. I remember when this matchup had thrillers, like the overtime punt return for the Ravens to win in 2023, but unfortunately this Ravens team just doesn't have it this year. The Rams' offense actually underperformed to my expectations. Granted, Puka Nacua going down to injury didn't do them any favors. Their defense, though, looked fantastic, with linebacker Nate Landman setting a franchise record of 17 tackles as they managed to hold the Lamarless Ravens to just 3 points. Derrick Henry actually managed to hold on to the ball this game, but it may just be a Baltimore curse more than a Henry curse, with both Zay Flowers and Cooper Rush losing a fumble. I hate to say the Ravens' Super Bowl hopes might be gone, even though Lamar will come back, but I just don't see a team with this defense going all the way. I absolutely hate to say it, and maybe they would have had the same game with him in. But is Kyler the problem? The Cardinals just had their best offensive game of the year despite missing 3 running backs and Marvin Harrison going down during this game, and it's the first game they don't have Kyler. Now, this isn't me saying Jacoby Brissett had a great game. He missed on over half his passes as well as throwing an interception, but could the Cardinals have done this without him? On the flip side, the Colts remain absolutely dominant, with Daniel Jones and Jonathan Taylor absolutely plowing through this defense. Never did I think I'd say the Colts might be the best team in the league right now. I think I had them at 4-13 in my preseason predictions, but this very well could be the best team in the league right now. For the first time this year, the Jaguars' defense is unable to force a turnover, and it leads to their second loss of the year. Without their defense creating as many opportunities, it really showed how mediocre the Jacksonville offense is. They only generated 59 yards of rushing on 19 carries, and Trevor Lawrence only had 258 yards on 42 pass attempts, with 154 of those coming on just 2 of the Jags' 12 drives. The Seahawks offense honestly didn't blow me away either. Their running game looked as bad, if not worse, than Jacksonville's, but several chunk plays through the air put Seattle in the right position to win. I feel bad for the Jaguars' defense because I truly believe it's one of the best in the league. Their offense just can't keep up. I think the Cowboys' season is starting to slip away from them much faster than they thought it would. After their defense's stellar performance last week in their blowout of the Jets, granted, it was the Jets, they go into Carolina and get absolutely dissected. Bryce Young definitely had one of his on days, throwing for all of the Panthers' touchdowns, but I think the true story emerging from the Panthers this year is Rico Dowdle. The running back had 30 carries and still managed to average over 6 yards a carry, falling just 17 yards short of 200 on the day. After this week, the Cowboys are in desperate need of a turnaround win, or they may risk falling to last place in the East. I think I predicted this game almost completely accurately in my weekly TikTok prediction. The Raiders, despite some turnover problems, would still manage the win. Granted, in Geno's defense, he only threw 1 interception, unlike the 2 I predicted, but the point stands. The Titans' inability to move the football and Cam Ward covering his hands with butter before the game ultimately spelled Tennessee's demise. Geno Smith actually looked pretty decent on the stat sheet despite the interception, only missing on 6 passes and scoring a touchdown, but the Titans were going crazy with tackles for loss, which made their score look worse. I would call this a bounce-back win for Vegas to turn their season around, but unfortunately they have a tough division game in Kansas City next weekend. In the battle of which team can get more injured and still manage a win, it goes to the Buccaneers. Baker Mayfield, despite missing 2 starting running backs and 4 starting receivers, still is able to put up 30 on a good San Francisco defense. Granted, that defense is also riddled with injuries, with another star, Fred Warner, going down in this game. I genuinely feel bad for the 49ers because what are you supposed to do as a team when you have over half of your starters missing? This team could actually be so good, but they have got to have something going on in conditioning that just makes them fall apart. Maybe that's the reason they are so good. The training makes them super good just until they die. Mac Jones finally falls when he throws 2 interceptions, when the Bucs finally caught on to how he only throws it to Kendrick Bourne, and Baker Mayfield continuing to cement his MVP candidacy. That's what truly spells the difference in Tampa this week. Unfortunately for Joe Flacco, he just couldn't make it happen twice. In his defense, it was not for a lack of effort, with the veteran throwing in 2 late touchdown passes to bring the game within a touchdown, but this is Cincinnati's defense we're talking about, not Cleveland. The Packers drive downfield and get a field goal, with the Browns missing their own, sealing the game at a 9-point loss. I understand that the Packers are a 1-loss team, but in my opinion, they're the weakest 1-loss team out there. They'll make the playoffs, but every passing week is just making me question them more and more. They finished this one out nicely with 17 points in the 4th quarter, and the defense did excellent holding the Bengals scoreless in the first half. Maybe I'm just hating, but this team just feels like it's missing something. Patrick Mahomes finally gets his first win against Jared Goff. As usual between these teams, we got to experience an absolute masterclass, with them combining for only 14 incompletions. The Lions just struggle a lot more on 3rd down, and they couldn't put up the points. I'm not going to go out and whine and defend Detroit by blaming the refs, even though this game was poorly officiated, because Mahomes just actually had a good day. 3 touchdowns, all through the air, and Kansas City's only touchdowns of the day. They get to host Las Vegas next week in what I imagine to be another win, so maybe they can fight for control of the West. This game was just a Bijan Robinson highlight tape. The running back was tearing off yards from this Bills defense and was the sole cause of almost all 3 of their touchdowns. Michael Penix was also doing pretty well throwing the ball, but it helps when you have 3 20-plus yard runs on the first 4 drives of the game. This also raises a lot of red flags about the Bills' defense when you remember this same Falcons offense had a goose egg against the Panthers just a few weeks ago. Doesn't help when your MVP caliber quarterback throws 2 interceptions and almost loses 2 fumbles. Definitely a rough week for Buffalo, and then you remember how they haven't beaten a team with more than 1 win on the year. I'd be worried when they face Carolina next week. I think this game was a lot more of the Commanders playing themselves than the Commanders playing the Bears. Chicago secured half of their points scored in the game off of Washington turnovers, including the game-winning field goal. Chicago did play fairly well offensively, but it felt like their defense was the one setting them up for such golden opportunities. Jaden Daniels was doing what he could to fight off the mistakes, but an interception and a fumble on their final drive did the Commanders no favors. Luckily for Washington, with how the NFC East looks this year, this was not a must-win game, with them still only being a game back on the Eagles. For Chicago, this was actually a huge win to help them keep up in an NFC North with 0 teams currently below 500. I was hoping that doing new predictions every week instead of relying on my preseason choices would make my record go up, but I actually went 7-8 this last week. That pushes me to 56, 36, and 1 on the year, mainly carried by my first 3 weeks of predictions. Hopefully next week I can actually bounce back, but until then, I'll see you all after week 7. Thanks for watching.